we had a discussion prior just about what we want to talk about today, and I sent you a link about compassion and inquiry because it's just something that resonates with me and something I've been trying to practice myself as I learned about it a few months ago, maybe a little bit longer. But it's really how do you talk to yourself? What's your self-talk language like? What does that mean? What's the value of it? Why is it important? Those kinds of things.
Why is it important to you? Let's start with that.
I would say it's important because I think as I recognize that how you talk to yourself is relative to your view of yourself, and how you talk to others is relative to yourself and others. So, for example, I often tell students now, like, if you're telling yourself, "Oh man, I didn't get that. I'm stupid," or "I'm this," and then I ask yourself, well, if someone outside, external, said that to you, how would that land? How would it feel? And most times people answer, well, not good, I don't really like that. And so I get them to draw a comparison to, okay, maybe you could easily talk about it or quantify it as someone else said. But when you say it to yourself, how does that land? How does it feel now that we've talked about it? And then usually, sometimes you get a light bulb and like, okay, that makes sense. You don't get immediate change, but now we have this dialogue where like, okay, maybe if I recognize that I'm saying very negative things about myself, that does have an effect on my well-being, my moods, all kinds of things.
And I think I would, counter is the wrong word, but I would compliment the concept of compassionate inquiry with one of my mentors, Mark Brackett. He's a professor at Yale. His concept is giving yourself permission to feel. So in that sense, I think his idea of this week is empathy and compassion. I think many people talk about those things as one, but they are different. Empathy is the notion of just being aware of, like, a rat just bumped his knee. I'm empathetic towards that, but having compassion would be like me offering you some ice, for example, like the action of. I think, and I haven't, I've only thought about this the last 30 minutes, but I think one complements the other when it comes to being self-compassionate. Is in my opinion, a prerequisite to external empathy. Like, if you don't give a shit about how, like, loving yourself, then how do you even have a baseline level just to, like, be like, oh, how's everyone else doing?
I think that's important point because we have a lot of external references and motivators about how you should display love, how you should say it, but we don't have a lot of external motivators about how you should display it or say it towards yourself. It's always extrinsic. You should say I love you. You should say I love this, or but you don't walk by a billboard on the bus. Hey, have you told yourself you love yourself today? Like, you're never going to run into that. And I think that's actually super important based on what you said, because if I have an idea of how I feel about myself, then I think that starts with the idea that I got to think critically about how I manage my own thoughts and everything else. And then I think when I'm talking to you, I can have compassion for you. Like, you know what? Maybe this person doesn't know how to love themselves. Maybe they don't have the concept of how they feel about themselves. And it's always been how I would feel about others. And so centering yourself in thoughts, feelings, and actions is not selfish. I think it's an act of necessity, really, and courage in the face of not ever being shown or told that this is something that is super important to do, and it's critical to your mental health and well-being in general, knowing who you are and knowing how you feel about yourself.
Those of us who have been fortunate to go traveling or to fly anywhere, like when they do the pre-flight demonstration video, it's like, if anything happens and that little mask comes down, you save yourself first. But in this case, I think to have a more positive spin on it, you need to know how you feel first before you can assess how, especially in the roles that we have in society. If you're not aware of, like, how things are happening in this container, how are you ever supposed to, like, I think, like, to take the step further, like, I think the relationship with yourself is the most important one.
Absolutely.
There's so many times, I think, especially in, like, how society is designed today, there's always something to do that takes your mind away from how you feel. Like, if you're not as old as you are, but like
what?
but for someone listening to this, like back in my day, when I was waiting for the dentist, when I was waiting for the waiting in line to buy gum, I'm chilling. I'm just standing there, thinking about what just happened today. I think about what I have to do. Those shower moments, like, and now, like, modern day society has really robbed us, robbed is a strong word, has diverted our attention to cool, like here's this latest trend, cool cat video. And I think that takes away from one's ability to deepen your relationship with yourself. Those are the moments like when, because for most people who have families or like partners and stuff, when the moment you step home, like someone else needs you. Someone else needs you. But those moments when I was a kid or growing up, I'm on a bus. Now it's when I'm driving, give me all the time to myself.
I think what you're speaking to me is like, I think Rob is a bit strong, but I don't think it's inappropriate because our devices encourage us to, I would say, it robs us of those little moments of introspection. I'm in the line at the grocery store. Most people, you'll see them. When there's dead time, I look at this thing, right? Whereas before, I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and you're waiting in the grocery store. There's no phone to look at. You're looking around. You're looking at the magazine. You're looking at the gum. Thinking, I want this candy, right? Just all those things, right? But now, if I'm in the grocery store now, okay, I'm waiting. And just as a thing, people don't know me, I do not like to queue. It's one of my problems. But now, actually, I've had to train myself to realize that actually, I don't need to fill this interim time with more information coming in. I don't need to fill it. I have the option to just put it away. And actually, I learned a bunch of that. You're just like, okay, you know what? I'm just going to look at the environment and, hello, or think about what's going on.
And talk to someone.
And talk to someone as opposed to engaging in this thing. Because I thought, you know what? I still have plenty of time for this thing. It's going to be there. It is never going anywhere. So I like that the actual, the robbery of our introspective time I think is appropriate because we're always trying to fill those times with other things. And that cumulative effect of not having constant opportunities for boredom, for introspection, for whatever that's not mitigated by some other device, I think that has an effect on us as a society, definitely individually, but collectively as a society.
Right. And in our little notes document that we have, you questioned what's my McDonald's exercise. Well, let's get into it here. Before I became this version of myself, I've gone through probably close to 200 hours of therapy. Cognitive behavior therapy, huge thing in modern day therapy. The uninitiated, it's considering and rewiring your thought pattern. So that was a huge thing for me because for myself, I had really destructive thought patterns before growing up in a traditional Asian household, and a lot of other minority families can speak of this as well. Can speak on this how if it's everything has to be perfect, and you seldom hear praise, and it's just I'm just working my way through it.
Yes, absolutely.
You seldom hear praise, but then the first time anything imperfection comes up, it's like you'll hear that loud and clear. So for me, my McDonald's exercise is I needed to take that voice away and improve upon my relationship with myself. So the McDonald's exercise was I used to go to McDonald's first thing in the morning. It was 6:30, 7 o'clock. Me and 10 seniors just chilling. And I would whatever. Insert item here of the day. I would have a notepad similar to this. I would play 2 songs. First song, I would allow any thoughts I would have without judgment, just writing them all down. Sometimes it'd be like, why do you hate yourself so much, man? And the second song was like, okay, how would I want to actually think about the situation? And that's the exercise, 8 minutes. Interesting. And man, I don't think I've shared this with you before, but my relationship with myself is so destructive before. When it didn't show up in how I still loved others, but it was perfection or nothing, and it got to a point where my lowest of lows, I just couldn't get out of bed, never acted upon these things, but there were some suicidal ideations about why have you accomplished X? Why have you accomplished? It was just screaming. And then doing that for probably 6 months really, really helped. It was no one else knew what I was doing. It was just some 20-year-old kid doing a little thing with his headphones in. But so that's the McDonald's exercise.
Wow, no, that's excellent. Thanks for sharing that. I'm actually makes me feel good that you found therapy at such a young age. It took me a long time to realize that I could go and I had the resources and able to go, and that as an activity that you're doing for yourself, it takes courage to admit that I need to do something and then to commit to it and then do it, and it takes a long time to see benefit. It didn't just like snap, happen right away, right? But that exercise to me speaks to, again, that entire part of the exercise relies on introspection. I got to be able, okay.
There's no one else. It was just me and
My
headphones and the
thing. Right, I do the thing, and what I like about that is that, okay, I had to commit to it, trusting the process and knowing that it could get better. And as you sort of do it, it's iterative. I like how you refer to yourself as versions. I often do the same thing. Like, this version of me is a better version than, you know, the one that preceded me a month ago or 6 months ago or a year ago. And I know the difference because now when I reflect and look back, I can tell how far I've come. And also, alternatively, I'm not scared about how much further I need to go because there's a long way to go still. And I still see a lot of improvement that's there. But that exercise, I think that's awesome, you know.
Can I put some parameters around
Do
it
it.
as well? I think people, especially when I see older people in my work, they have this thing. You and I go to the share a facility when it comes to your exercise and my work. And the amount of times throughout the week I'll hear like, I'm late. To what? To what, man? Or woman?
To what?
But it's like, oh, like, I usually work out at whatever.
Yes.
And that is self-dialogue right there. Right?
Yes.
And for this exercise here, I stopped doing it after 6 months. I did it 5 times a week for 6 months. When shit no longer serves you, let it go.
Well, you know what? You're speaking to what I liked about that is that in order to make the change, it was clear that when you wrote it out and you saw it on the paper, because it's always there. When you saw on the paper, it was easier to conceptualize, oh my gosh, this is an idea.
These are real things that I think
This is a real thing, because I'm the only one here. It came from me. I wrote it down, so there's nowhere to hide. There's nowhere to escape. And what it made me think of is that in sort of the entry point of the notes we talked about, Dr. Matthew was talking about compassion inquiry. He talks, another way to enter the concept is that there's voices there, and as opposed to getting rid of them, he proposes I should try and find out why they're there, what they're doing for me. Because his comment is that if there's a voice in there, it's part of me. I shouldn't consider the only way to make it stop is to get rid of it or cut it out or excise it, but to find out, because if there's a voice in there, it's got a purpose. It's doing something for you. Maybe it's not maybe it's what we call maladaptive now, as in not good, but at some point, maybe it was there to protect you or inform you. But now that you understand it and look at it as a construct, that voice is there and you wrote it out, this is what that voice is saying. You're able to start that loop of why is this voice saying that? I'm able to do that introspection and find out, well, there's other reasons why this is coming out, and then there's that iterative process. Okay, now, the voices that are in there, they're still there. They're just not saying the same things now.
Yeah, same voice.
The voices are there.
The tone, A, tone, B, message, C, I'm going to give you this analogy here. Like when I described it to when I brought it back to my therapist, I was like, oftentimes when I first started, it felt like I was a kid or just like a small person getting hit by tsunamis over and over and over. It sounded like someone threw me what's the circle thing called? The buoy?
Oh yeah.
Give me the buoy. Let me float. And then, it was like in that exercise, almost felt like, no, not almost, I'm going to definitively say it felt like teaching myself how to swim amongst my own thoughts. To be like, okay, I know this, maybe this tsunami is going to come, but now I'm going to A, view it as a wave, B, have the skills to be like, all right, cool, water coming, proverbial water, and scared of what's coming. Brace yourself. Let's start doing the thing. It's like, and I still work on that every single day. Like it's not going to be perfect, but then just to be able to like have a conversation with it. Because like I think I don't want people to pathologize to be like, yo, like when you talk to yourself, that's kind of weird. But like that's actually a really healthy thing to be able to get to that point.
100%. I don't think it's weird at all. I think what you're describing there to me, in my own experience, there's a time when I didn't understand how to A, accept the feeling happening, B, allow it to happen, and C, know that there will be an end to it. And not just like be following it through until its logical conclusion. I just actually know now, okay, it's okay to be angry, it's okay to be sad, it's okay to be depressed. There will be an end to it, and I should allow this to happen. And because I did that, now I can work through what that is. Again, back to introspection. Why is this going on for me? And I go through some of these things on a regular basis. I've got partner, parenting, work. You come through like, oh my God, no, and sometimes I feel angry.
Let's just hang on. You just named like 4 things there, and I think like on top of that, I think that's part of why people might find it so daunting. That you're like, fuck, and I also have to deal with myself. I'm like,
right,
boom, 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 and then boom.
How much space can you make for how many things?
I hope that people who listen to this realize, like, yes, all those other things improve. Handle this first.
Yes, I agree, because there's nothing about this that's not interconnected. My relationship with myself is relative to all of the things, relationship with work, family, life, play, all of it is all there. There's nothing that's separate. And so you can't really, you can describe it in silos, but really it's all together in one plot, right? And so I think that's the magic part. Once you understand that, okay, my relationship, if I improve my relationship with myself, everything else in absolute terms is very likely to improve.
What's something to make it more tangible? What's something that you've done? Like I've done that exercise, the McDonald's exercise, whatever. Not whatever. The exercise. Can you share some that you've improved, like a method that you've used to improve your relationship with yourself?
For myself, just being diagnosed as an ADHD person at a very old age and figuring out that, oh, actually, I was able to now understand some of the reasons why my brain worked the way it was, and I was able to, give myself a pass on why sometimes I got so dysregulated, angry, and what I thought before was no reason. I thought it was my choices, my feelings. And there are some choices involved, but there are some things that are going on that make it very difficult for me to really understand it. So what I started, once I recognized and educated myself on what it was, I started giving myself the permission to make the mistakes and know that I could improve, as opposed to dwelling in CBT, they call it rumination, sitting with that thought and not being able to come out of it. And for me, with my own therapist, one of the epiphany moments, as I call them, she talked to me about narrative. So when you have a narrative and you're in the narrative, oftentimes before I knew what it was as a construct, I'd just be following through. I'm in the story and there's nothing I can do. I'm just following. Versus, okay, I'm in here, but actually, I'm actually partially responsible for crafting this. Which means if I am, then I have some control over it. And if I have some control, what can I do? And it's almost like working my way backwards. And then, as a concrete example, as I tried, the example was whenever I felt that well of frustration coming up, sometimes I was successful, sometimes I'm not, I would start to interject questions. Is this actually a threat? Am I actually in danger? What's the real problem here? And just whether or not I get the immediate answers, the progress was that the ability to think and inject the questions allowed the temperature, the de-escalation, much more likely a possibility that it happened. And sometimes it was successful and like, oh, no, and then just go back. Or other times like, actually, okay, let me take a step back, let me say something different, let me pause, let me walk away, let me do, and it's a work in progress still. But I found before I was able to interject those question asking of myself and knowing that it was okay for me to be angry. I should not deny the fact that anger is in the range of all the emotions and not vilify myself, but self-talk about it. Then I allowed space for me to ask and inquire with more compassion, not negative, but just why, how, or what can we do?
And I think this is a similar yet different concept when you gave yourself A, the permission, but B, like having the awareness to be like, yo, let me ask myself this question. It goes to the concept for me that I think about as automated reactive response. That is, to unpack that, is when A happens, B happens. And those are the things just so that they automatically happen without subconsciously. And a layman's examples would be when, for those of you who have pets, when you open the can of wet food, they know what's up. Automated reactive response, we're coming downstairs, let's do the thing. So I think, how do we consider, what is that for us humans? Is it like, and that looks different for every person, is it something that's, J. Cole talked about this, like to make a human example of it. He said that sometimes he had a step parent, and like when he was like 7 or 9, he said like, one time I peed on the floor. I got peed on the floor when I was a kid. He said like, my stepdad got so mad at me about that. That's something that's like, that still sticks with him. I guess, I don't know how old he is now, like mid-30s or something. So like those automated reactive responses, like that is very A, situational, and asituational, B, cultural, and C, entirely based on your unique set of experiences. And for you as a person to be able to step back and be like, no, like this is not going to bother me today. To that extent, I think it's super, super powerful to be like, not today, friend. Not today.
I think that what you're describing there is a trauma response. Something that happened in that moment that still sticks with him because he was penalized, punished, whatever. He now is able to reflect on it and say, okay, I can know that actually I'm not under threat, but yet I'm still feeling the feelings and all that stuff that came with it as if I was. And that's a trauma response. And we all exist in various levels of what I think trauma is part of the human experience. I don't think you can escape it. Minor, major, a lot of little. It's what's happened to you, what's not happened for you, how are you dealing with it, what support are you getting, what are you not getting. And as an adult, I think.
And also, how do we set up those how do we set up those reward systems so they're positive now? Like similar to those pets. This happens.
Yeah, so you're just.
How do I give myself credit as well?
So we'll describe that as a positive trigger. So for me, as soon as I go to the drawer, I pull, it's like, okay, I'm here. He knows, right? The sound of the drawer signals, hey, food is incoming. Actually with dogs or cats, they are very intelligent, but they have a limited capacity to control their emotional state, which is why those triggers are so important. It's just automatic, right? But as humans, we have a lot more capacity, but at the same time, sometimes that capacity is diminished because maybe we're not getting enough support. Maybe we haven't had the privilege of working through that. Because I say I did those things now because when I was in my early days, I had no money, very poor, struggling to survive. There was no time to sit around and think about how I can improve my responsibility. It was not even on the radar. It's like, how do I pay the bills? How do I put food in my belly? How do I get to work? And I think there's a bunch of it that's relative to privilege, because the privilege of being able to work on oneself, do it, see improvement, fail, repeat, that takes a significant amount of privilege.
Yep.
And I think those who have it should be quite grateful for that, because without it, you'd still find yourself in a place where you don't want to be, and you wouldn't necessarily know how to improve, how to get out of there, or what. You're just going to continue rolling. We're lucky enough to be able to actually sit down and ask the question.
Yeah, I think that's a great piece for anyone listening to this, and for both of us as well, to really consider when it comes to different people we get a chance to impact. To be like, this person's not thinking critically. At the same time, does this person have the space right now to think critically? And I think holding people to different standards is very important to me. Because there's some conversation, and you've seen me demonstrate this, there's some conversations I can have like this. These are my favorite conversations to have. But there's other conversations where let's just refer to this pop cultural event, and that's the end of it. And that's totally okay, because like you say, this shit is a privilege to be able to sit down and be like, go for smoothies once a week and be like, hey, let's talk about how we feel.
Let's wax philosophic about our feelings. Well, I say that as a joke, but again, I really have to really just acknowledge that I'm very happy that I do have this privilege and that I can do it. And it not just because it was just dropped on me, but it did take some time to get here. And acknowledging that journey and the learning that came from that is also something I think is undervalued. Is that you've come all this way, and if you never look back and reflect and say, hey, you know what? I came from this way back here where it was really difficult. I had no idea, and things looked negative, bleak, not good. But now I'm here. It's not perfect, and it never will be, but it's definitely better. And now I can see a path forward that means better, more, gooder than it did before, right? And I think that's also really powerful. Just say, okay, what I like about it in general, we'll talk about it, is what we call a strengths-based approach, as opposed to focusing on what was negative and what was bad, how well have I done? What good have I accomplished? How much better can I do, as opposed to, oh, that was really shitty, that sucked before, I hated that. And those things may still be true, but that gets right back to the original topic, which is the self-talk.
Yeah.
I can talk about those terms in the pejorative, or I can talk about them as positively as possible. And that's not to put a shiny coat over it. That's just to describe it in a way that centers what I can do, what strengths I have, how I was resilient, how I overcame, and what skills how I can continue to stack those skills to do better in the future.
Yeah. And I think it's so powerful as well to be able to look back on your own journey, because I think there's some people who may still be reluctant to face that relationship with themselves. And for example, like one of my best friends, we talked about his dad, like refuses to, all these years, I don't know, how old is his dad now? Probably like late 60s, early 70s, refuses to say positive things in the house when he goes to visit. Like just say, not like positive things as opposed to be like, oh, like this food was good, or like nice dinner. Like something more like, you did a good job today, or like, thank you for doing that. Like, 'cause it's just like so out of the arena of how that person was raised in his context.
Yes.
But then there's, like you say, there's a path forward. But that path forward needs to be, maybe that person never got, like, at the beginning of the conversation, I talked about permission.
Maybe they got the support. Maybe they got the encouragement, the ability to say, hey, you know what, we talked all the way here, talking to somebody, and because of how I know myself and how I talk to you, I actually get the sense that if I say something, if I'm vulnerable to you, you're not going to smack me down.
Yep.
You're not going to be mean. And that power in and of itself is, I think, what I try to do is say it's contagious. If I create the environment where I feel like you can say something and not know that I'm not going to be hurt or shamed or otherwise, I may be able to eke out a little bit more.
We talked about this last time as well. Remember when one of my athletes said to me after we watched film saying, I thought we scored 40 points, and for a 12-year-old girl to come to me and say, actually it was 36.
Confident. Yeah, right.
Yeah. Who knows what that would look like in other environments if I were to say that, even if I were to say that to the challenge. Like some could view any of that, anytime anything is misaligned with what you said, even though it may not be true, that could be a challenge when it comes to some, in ways that I've seen many authority figures in the familial structure I've seen in different families growing up. It's just like, how many times are you gonna double down, triple down on this thing when all you have to do is take a step back to be like you say, like question, why is this anger coming out? Why do I need to continue to defend this opinion? When really just be like, self-compassion, like, I was wrong. Cool, like, 12-year-old girl, you're right.
I think that the ability to do that comes from safety. And sometimes I think that, and depending on who you're talking to, you may not even be providing that safety, even though you may want to. You're having a difficult discussion with somebody, and it's difficult. So it's easier to say that, I can just not double down again. Right? So just to make the point, I wanted to touch on something you said before about someone who's a little bit older, and I'm trying to tie it back to the self-talk, because now as opposed to leaning into judgment, and the narrative says, hey, this person, I ask more along what you're saying. Well, what's my view of how they were educated, brought up? What was their experience? And I don't have to like them or love them or anything. If my self-talk tells me, oh, this guy's a joker, dipshit, as opposed to, you know what, I don't know what this person's been through. Mm-hmm. I don't know what brought them here. I think that's bullshit what they said. However, I can double down on closing the door, putting up the armor and moving away, or I can be like, okay, you know what, I don't have to approach or support, but I can make sure that I know that, hey, you know what, I don't have to double down on my judgment of you. I can give you the benefit of the doubt, which brings us back to empathy, leading into curiosity, and depending on our relationship, I may be like, you know what, you're the old guy at the party who says stuff that I don't like. So as opposed to being angry and upset about that being there, that's your space. It would often inject in it. Or maybe somebody else, like, you know what, you said that, but let me ask you how you feel about this. let me see if I can find a way to give you a different perspective, and because I'm curious about it. Whatever.
Yeah, I think that's twofold. One is the ability to, I think acceptance there is big when it comes to, well, on our commute over, I think I framed it as just because someone has reasoning for something doesn't make it doesn't excuse that behavior.
Right.
However, I think just acknowledging that, like, okay, I accept this person for what it is. But for me, I consistently operate from the space that I truly, truly believe that there's not bullshit. Every person I meet with, like that person is doing his or her best in this situation, and like we said, it is iterative. I'm going to believe for you to get better. I might not see this shit, but for me to give you that little bit of belief, however it looks like, and not just to like cast you away. Hopefully, somewhere down the road, I don't need to see it. That this whatever you're dealing with here improves, and I just gave you that little bit of space to be like, all right, cool. Like this person doesn't hate me for that.
And that takes work to get to that place where you can leave space and be able to do that. I also.
Sorry, one more thing, and as well as it's not my responsibility as well for them to improve.
That's right. Yeah, it's not your. That's right.
I believe in you. I will give you some resources, but if you don't do it, oop.
And in order to get there, I think one of the quotes I always, it's from The Matrix, so it's like, Morpheus always, knowing the path is different from walking the path. And we can believe in stuff really deeply, but when the trigger comes, the thing comes, we may not be able to operationalize and put forth that actual thing we believe in our mind because we've got a different response. Yeah. And that gap between knowing it and actually doing it, I'm hoping to narrow it as much as possible. Depending, if my wife listens to this, she's like, when does that happen? But you know what I mean? Like in this space where I'm a teacher, there isn't anything that you can say that's going to take me into dysregulation. It's like almost impossible. Mm-hmm. Put in a different context, it may be bang. I'm like, whoa, right? And so that, to me, that's where the work is. If I can get to the place where people that are closest to you, things that are said, the buttons that are, that can be pushed that will just light you on fire. How do I tamp that down? How to recognize what that is so that I know that what I believe is actually how I will respond in the most difficult times. When the buttons push, the trauma has been, the memory has been invoked. I'm having this automatic response. How do I get to the place where I'm like, okay, that is like the worst thing that can be said to me. However, I'm going to respond in a way that I believe to be right and best, and the best that I can do, as opposed to I'm just getting the response and it's happening, and I find myself on the other side where I'm upset with myself for not being able to respond appropriately. I'm a little bit saddened and dismayed, and I have to, come back and apologize. I got to talk to you. I got to make amends, because those things happen. I don't want to purport to anybody that shit never happens to me. It happens. Yep. And so I think the other part is I don't ever want to commit the idea that you go on this journey, you get better, it's always good, and that old me, like I'll never be like that. No, like sometimes it's 10 steps forward and 5 steps back, and it's not linear. Yep. Right. So.
And for me, those steps backwards are on those days where I don't feel it, or I don't have the capacity for that difficult interaction today. Preferred method set that's left unsaid, or there's some sort of personal bad blood there where that's yet to be resolved, and I don't know how that shows up for other people, but I can say for myself, because this is a conversation about self-dialogue and relationship with self, that for my relationship with myself, if I remove myself from that, I don't know how I would have reacted when I actually went there to that physical place. But I know that if I take a step back and I avoid, that's not the best strategy, but it's the best I can do right now.
Right.
So
this is the best I can do.
Yeah, I just don't want to deal with it right now.
Right. So no, I think avoidance is not ideal. Sometimes the ability to opt out or step back from and know that I don't have the capacity to deal with this effectively. So I'm not going to put myself in that further jeopardy to have to deal with it. I'm going to just, it reminds me more recently, I had a difficult conversation with one of my sons, and I, asking him to do something that's, if you're a parent here, but I've asked him to do something like a million times.
Yeah.
And in the moment, even with all the skills I just previously described, I knew I was right about it. However, that wasn't the point, because as it progressed, I felt the well of frustration starting to build much more slowly now. Before it was not quick, but and then as it happens, he was visibly emotionally upset, and so at some point, okay, and he went away, and he was very upset about it, and so in that moment, I'm like, okay, I had to just start doing the checks. What I was saying, I believed in. I know it was right. However, I think I could have handled this differently, and regardless of being right or wrong, I should have now recognized that the path that I was down or moving down wasn't going to produce the effective result. It was actually, it was not de-escalating, it was escalating in a way that the result was he was very upset. And so in that moment now, what I've tried to do is now, okay, that's happened. I can acknowledge that happened. I know I made mistakes there. And so what I try to do now, which is different from what I did before, was I try to sit with it immediately and reflect on it immediately. And that's hard, because now I'm like, okay, what happened? And I actually, you talk about avoidance. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna put on the headphones. I'll watch a show for a minute, and I find like I'm not into it. I've now created a little space, and now I take it off and I go back. Okay, what do I need to do? And so I went back to talk to him, and he wasn't ready.
And that's totally cool.
That's right.
Totally cool.
I was ready. He wasn't ready.
Because sometimes that happens, and it's the most frustrating thing.
Yes.
Someone's ready, but the other person's not ready.
Not ready. And I had to respect the fact that he wasn't ready. And so to me, the win in all of this was understanding that, okay, I came to make amends. I came to show that, hey, I actually said to the door, hey, you know what? I'm sorry. I did this. I need to do better. Yeah. There's no quantification. It's just what it is. And he heard, and then I left, and then I walked away, knowing that he wasn't ready to engage. And that was something that I wasn't able to do before. Like, okay, I'm ready. We've got it here, which was a doubling down of the previous thing under the guise of making it better, which is actually.
May I steer us for a moment?
Yes.
In that situation, you demonstrated restraint, which is great. And I think that's when it comes to an external conversation, there is the other person is able to be like, I'm out. Right? I think, and sometimes doesn't happen as cordially as that.
Yes.
However, to get us back on topic, when it comes to internal conversation, if you were to have that conflict with yourself, that could go on for minutes, hours, weeks, days, I don't know, years. It could go on forever. But I think like to be able to like recognize that, to be like to say what you said to your son, to yourself, be like, if your external self and your internal self are a team, just be like, yo, my bad, man. Like here I'm speaking to myself, my bad. Like for handling this, what's a good example? Say like I didn't to use my work for example. I didn't explain that warm-up basketball game to the ability I could, and 3 of the athletes didn't understand because I failed to explain it at this level. Okay, so I could just ruminate that. In previous iterations of me, I would just be like, continue to dwell on that until the next practice and be like, okay, now, here we go. Gotta do this. Like, I have the notes. Yeah, I've watched the videos on how to do this. I've done this drill myself. But now it's just really like, cool. My conversation with myself is, yo, we tried our best. There were 30 athletes in there. 27 of them still understood. And 3 of them could have just been like, not putting the blame on them. It could be like inexperience. It could be like their placements in the gym. They could have, they could have just been like talking to another athlete. There's so many variables to, but not to be like, this is all on me and I suck. Because that's not the case. Life is complex. As you like here, it's just you and me. But when we go out to the real world, it's like, all right, cool. I've done the work. I'm presenting myself. I'm just part of this ecosystem. And how do I contribute positively to this ecosystem? By facilitating this relationship with myself.
100%. It's describe it. I had to actually apologize to myself and say, you know what, I'm sorry that I did that. I had to acknowledge that it was happening. I had to acknowledge that wasn't something that I want to do ever again, knowing that it still might happen again. I really try and really inject that, because if you don't, if it's like, okay, never again, then ultimately you're disappointed. Because you're setting yourself up for I think a kind of failure that's not productive. I think there's lots of productive ways to fail, but one of them is setting yourself up to fail is not ideal. So I'm like, okay, this time I'm going to try and do this. Hopefully for next time I'll be more aware, I'll be more able. I try to get through that, and still in this moment I'm still upset about it. Really, I'm still carrying it. But I find that part's better. I've given myself permission to fuck it up spectacularly and still be able to be okay.
Yeah, it's tough, man. I mean, there's some times where my example of the J. Cole situation is I love my mom and we have a great relationship. When I was younger, we would always have to, I like doing my hair, whatever. So after I'm done the blow dryer, like there's like a place where you put the blow dryer back. Yeah. Before the product goes in, and sometimes as a human being, I don't put it back on the thing. And I think I talked about this earlier, like I get so much criticism the moment it doesn't go right, be like, hey, why didn't you put it back? But I think but I would say like 70% of the time I put it back, but I don't hear, hey, thanks for putting it back. And I think in those situations, that's when internal dialogue, internal relationship needs to kick in, to be like, hey, like, I'm not going to hear this from her. That's cool. I'm going to give myself credit to be like, I did everything I need to do. This is one of 250 things I need to do today. And I did that one thing correctly. And that thing didn't even satisfy me. It was for someone else. Right? And then
it was not satisfied. It was not satisfied.
Yeah, I can leave that shit on the counter all day. But it helped someone else. Therefore, I'm more in love with myself now because I helped someone else through that process.
I think you should deal with parents. You're describing a similar situation that happened to my son. I'm like, man, come on, dude. This is like
do the thing.
The millionth time. And so that's the thing. It's like, it's complex, it's tough. But I think the ability to really think about it and say, okay, it's okay. I'm going to speak in more positive terms. I'm going to try and frame it a different way. I'm going to try and operationalize that by next time trying to improve.
Yeah, because I think to take us home, like the first concept we talked about was compassionate inquiry.
What does that mean? Compassion to yourself.
And the first fucking word is compassion.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
right. I know, right?
Like, if you don't have compassion, then it's just, I don't even think it's an inquiry. Then it's just,
yeah, it's right.
It's just a demand of yourself.
Yes,
it's a fucking demand. Yeah. Whereas if you're like, all right, cool, this is what happened. I want to do better. Passionate inquiry. Because even taking that space to be like, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, however what you want to count to, that becomes an inquiry. I want to do that. Like I've thrown those notebooks out, but if I look at those notebooks from McDonald's, so many times you're like, I don't even want to repeat some of those things. Those are not inquiries. Those are demands of myself based on previous trauma and expectations other people put on me.
I think what you're pointing to is something I like to talk about is what does compassion mean? What does inquiry mean? Because if you think about compassion, if you just say the words, that sounds nice, as you said, that sounds nice. So what does that mean? You say that. That sounds nice. But what does that really mean? Compassion.
That's half your life.
That's right. Right? That means something. And if I dig into what that actually means, then I have to think about it. And then if I ask myself, what is inquiry? What does that actually mean? Yeah. And then when I join those two things together, how do I actually do the things that they mean in the way that they're meant, as opposed to just saying, I'm just going to ask myself nice questions. Well, it's more than that, right? Yeah. I have to think of compassion as a thing. How does it work? What does it look like?
Because like we talked about, like otherwise it's just empathy. You're adding empathy towards some action.
Yes.
The actual step is compassion.
Action.
Yeah, action.
All right, man.
Yeah, I'm self-compassioned out. Like that was good stuff.